Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this, the Legends podcast with Sarah Faruya. And this is part of the mini series, What the Fuck Happened Next? And today I am so thrilled to be welcoming my first ever guest on the Legends series. Back when we did it as a video, Tracey had a two-parter back in August 2019, and today we are here to find out what the fuck happened next in Tracey's life. I believe there are many ways to lead a life, and everybody has stories, and I want to tell them. I also don't believe in fairy tales. I don't believe when they say, and they lived happily ever after. I want to know what happened next. And so today we're going to spend 30 minutes with Tracey to find out what happened next. Hi, Tracey.
Hi, how are you, Sarah? It's good to be back.
I'm very good, thank you. So about Tracey, she is a serial entrepreneur and multipreneur based in Tokyo, and she's one of the most successful Airbnb hosts in Tokyo with her company, Tokyo Family Stays. She also runs software company On4 Inc. or N4 Inc. with her family. Her consulting business, Tracey Northcott Consulting, is where she helps short-term rental hosts discover the true potential of their asset to get booked in a crowded market without discounting. Now, that's kind of basically what she's doing at the moment, but there's so many other things to Tracey. So when we left Tracey in August 2019, and they all lived happily ever after, Tracey was looking into her greatest year yet. But before we get into that, I'd like to ask Tracey, what's a story that's either had an impact on you or influenced you or inspired you in the last 2 years since we spoke?
What's a story? I think it's more the collective that people are telling stories, that that people are wanting more than the highlight reel, and that realness, that vulnerability is so much more interesting and gives so many more layers. And I think I think we're evolving, hopefully. Well, I am anyway. And I'm just really enjoying getting to know people, and I'm more resonating with the not so pretty bits, the real bits, and I think more people are getting just immune to the glossy, the glossy advertising that goes out on social media. So what's much more interesting is the real stories.
So stories of evolution, do you have one that you'd like to share with us that you saw somebody going through, or a story that really struck you during this time?
To be honest, for the last couple of years, 2 years since we did this podcast, I have really been licking my wounds. I have been, focused a lot on my own story and figuring out what that is. That's what I've really been trying to do. It's been a rough couple of years, I won't lie.
Okay, so let's get into it, Tracey. So I want to be really clear here. The last 2 years have been really hard for Tracey, but we agreed up front on a pre-call to this that she was happy for me to question her about it. So I want to be very clear that this is all with consent. And of course, Tracey, you can refuse to ask, or if something feels too hurtful or too traumatic to talk about, we can move away from it as well. But I'm going to ask you some of the hard questions now, just because of what you just said, and because of that realness, and because your story is such a stark contrast from A to B. I think it's an interesting one to tell, but I don't want to do that at the expense of your feelings or your mental health or your nervous system. So I just want to make sure that we're still in the same place. Are you okay?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, great. So in August 2019, Tracey was looking to 2020. We live in Tokyo. The Olympics were about to start the following summer. She had loads of Airbnbs. They were booking up at premium rates, and she was looking into the best year ever. But not only the best year ever, the best year that was going to set her up for the rest of her life. What the fuck happened next, Trace?
Well, yes. I mean, everyone knows what happened in the world, but how that specifically affected us was we started noticing things a lot earlier here in Tokyo. So we were hit hard and hit early because we are in Asia and we get a lot of Chinese visitors. So, we started hearing rumblings January, end of January of 2020. And then, that's when I first started to get the cancellation. I was like, going, oh, this is a bit overkill, isn't it? And, here's me in denial, thinking everything was fine. And then the Tokyo Marathon was cancelled in February. And I was still just thinking that the whole world had gone crazy, that they were all overreacting. This was nothing. This was a blip, Of course, I wasn't objective about that. That was because I had my whole 5-year plan geared up to this year, and this was unplanned, unseen. Wasn't even a threat on the radar. So of course, I'm just in denial. It just got very real very quickly. I did not understand what was going on, and I was completely bewildered. And I thought everyone else had gone nuts. In reality, it was me going nuts. So I spent a long time on in just being numb, just being confused about what was going on. My whole nervous system was just in disarray, I think is the best way. It just took me a long time to process. I was not processing things at all, because every morning it would be the ding on my phone. For 3 weeks, we were just getting cancellation after cancellation after cancellation, thousands of cancellations. And I'm not kidding, millions of dollars, well, at least $1 million went within a couple of weeks' time of revenue. And that's a lot to process when you're the head of a small company. You just see that all going, and then of course then you start projecting things like, are we going to have to sell the house? Are we going to have to, what are we going to do here? It was a very, very confusing time. So that's what the fuck happened. It was not good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've got goosebumps as you're telling me this, and I can feel emotion rising in myself as you tell me this, Tracey, because I mean, obviously I was there watching this happen with you, and lucky for me, my business wasn't super affected, but lucky for me also, that meant that I was able to be there for other people, and that's obviously my job as well. So I was able to kind of try and give a little bit of backbone to people. So you just described, so you said there that in Japan, just a little bit of history is that the Diamond Princess, which was a cruise ship, pulled in on its way around the southern seas here and had people on board who had got COVID, and then was docked in Yokohama, which is the second city here in Tokyo. So when Tracey says that we were hit hard and fast with that, it was a very quick response to that. My best guess is that Japan's seen something like this before. And with it being such a tiny, tiny island with so many people on it, it could be catastrophic if an epidemic swept through without any control. So very quickly we masked up and so on, so that it wasn't as terrible as it was in, say, England or USA or something like that. On the other hand, Tracey, you're watching your stuff go down there. So what was that like? I mean, you mentioned there, like, you were in denial. You've often said to me that this felt like the 7 stages of grief. So you were in shock and denial then. Yeah. Yeah,
completely. And, first of all, there was my own, denial. So thinking that everyone else was crazy. And then the realization that I'd been seeing everything incorrectly. That's a really hard lesson to learn. When you've thought one thing and you're really adamant that this is the way, this is the truth, and then very gently people, showing you that perhaps you're not seeing things clearly. That was probably harder than anything else, I think. Recognizing that I had, been misleading myself because I didn't want to believe something. That's a that's a hard lesson to learn. Is it like when you leave a cult, or when there's a lot of polarity at the moment in the world with one side and another? Is that what happens when you sort of see things very, very differently? It was very hard on my nervous system, extremely difficult, and I was very fortunate to have very kind people around me who were just very steady and just held me and let me put one foot in front of the other and make sure that I was taking care of myself, and just gave me the confidence to think, well, you're not going to be out in the street, you're not going to have to sell your house immediately, so just slow it down. And I'm truly grateful to all of those people and my family, my parents. Oh my God, they're amazing that they just were able to just give clarity and give. And actually, you know what? It was my brother who gave me the most clarity, because I was often one of my rants, or often one of my emotional flooding times, and I'd said something. It's like I was so frustrated because everything was going so well, and then everything just went to shit. And I almost felt like it was my fault, because I was so, pride comes before a fall. All those old, cliches come back. It's just like, okay, was I overconfident? Did I bring this on myself because I was smug, or, I was looking forward to something being so good, and it's like, well, ripped out, the universe had a different story for me, And the way my brother got me out of it was, I'd said something like, it's not my fault. I was like, in the injustice of it all. And then he looked at me and said, it's not your fault. And I think that was the first time that I just went, oh, okay, it's not actually my fault. So yeah, I'm still getting emotional now. It's funny, even after all this time.
Yeah, I can feel it too, Tracey, and I feel really it's sad. It's very sad, and so while we just allow this emotion to be present here, I'm just going to say, like, in the 7 stages of grief, then there's like pain and guilt. And I think what you were plugging into there was the guilt. It's like that somehow you made it. I mean, it seems bonkers, doesn't it? It does seem a bit bonkers, but at the time, because you were in what we would call emotional flood, and you were completely hijacked by your nervous system, because I mean, listeners, I just don't know if you can imagine what it's like to watch when she says it was going ding, 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 that's the messages coming through from the apps that she uses to rent out her properties. And those dings were cancellations coming in. So from every single day, that was money flying out of the bank, basically. Is that right, Tracey?
Yes. And so it wasn't just, so I think it was hard as well, because I wasn't just dealing with my own fear of losing money, my own fear of the disease, which was unknown. So we're all
of course. Let's not forget there was a disease here.
Yeah. And we're all, none of us know this invisible invader. So we've all got this pressure. So we're all washing our hands, we're all masked up, we're all going like, who's Typhoid Mary out there? Like, we are, bunkered into our houses and washing our hands and spending the day looking at graphs. You remember those days of looking at graphs and looking at like the numbers going up, and different countries here and different countries there, and it's just, and looking at numbers of people dying. And so on a human level, it was just horrible. And then on a personal level, my business was collapsing around me. But and it's not as if one of us in the household actually had a stable income. We were both, my husband and I, were both invested in this. So our income is really reliant on this business. So so it just collapsed completely. We have staff that we feel responsible for that we can now no longer pay. And I did not, I was not my best self as a CEO. I was not a good leader. And so I've got that guilt as well. And then on top of that, layered on top of that, is I'm dealing with everyone's confusion, saying, can I travel? Can I not travel? And they're writing to me, asking me questions. I'm going, like, I don't know. And then people are asking for refunds on non-refundables. And so I had to sort of make, business decisions to save my, to try and keep life support into my own company. So it was a lot. It was a lot. And, there were times that I did well. There were times that I did poorly. I was, I can just reflect on everything, trying to reflect on it without judgment. I was doing the best I could at the time.
I mean, Tracey, any one of those on their own would be really difficult to deal with. Like, if it was just that people were saying, can I travel? Can I travel? Can I travel? And I think if I remember rightly, when you were in the shock and denial phase, I hope you don't, do you mind me sharing a little bit from the convenience store? I remember
I'm not a woman of mystery, Sarah.
I know, but I have to get your permission for that.
Sure,
like,
absolutely.
We were standing up at the Family Mart, the convenience store in my hometown, and you would just say, I mean, this is from a place where you are filled with adrenaline, filled with cortisol, like your brain is firing all over the place, and you were like, Donald Trump and China have like made some kind of bargain so that this brings China down, and I was like, ooh, okay. And that's when I had to calm my nervous system down there to understand how to talk to you that day as well, and to understand how to to try my best to work with that, because I think you've hit on something here which is really unfolding for me at the moment as well, which is that sense that it was your fault. I'm not surprised, obviously, as a friend and as a kind of collaborator. I'm like, of course it's not your fault, Tracey. You do not have the power to create a pandemic which takes millions of people down. Well, you do if you decide to go and breathe on loads of people. That's actually a literal power that you might have. But that wasn't the thing you needed to hear. You needed your big brother to tell you it's not your fault. But in this kind of, and I think you touched on this in your introduction here, this kind of law of attraction, kind of toxic positivity environment that can be very present in the coaching world, you're told that if thoughts become things, and if you're not thinking the good thoughts, or on the other side of that, there's this kind of rather Catholic feeling where it's like, if you wish for too much, then you'll be taken down, or what you said there, pride comes before a fall. There's probably an element of truth in that. But at the same time, Trace, I can really understand why you would start. I mean, obviously it's part of the 7 stages of grief, the Kubler-Ross graph, but really, it's I'm not surprised that you had some of those feelings. And there's one thing to be positive, and there's one thing to be optimistic, and there's one thing to take action, and there's one thing to believe you can do something and then take it forward. But it's another to imagine that there's this law of attraction where you put out into the world something and then it comes back to you. Of course you're going to think, shit.
Yeah.
What the fuck is this? What did I do to create this?
Exactly. Which is, it just didn't feel fair. It didn't feel like, I deserved it. And it was just like, fuck, it was frustrating. So, yeah. And I think a lot of, and then now that I'm sort of looking out now, realizing that a lot of other people were also really, really badly affected. It wasn't just, poor me. The whole world has been affected in some way.
Let me help you out here. I think you might be saying that you're at the point, well, that feels a bit edgy what you're saying here, but I think but you're being quite careful about what you say, is that you are now at the point, you're now at a stage which could be reconstruction and working through, or it could be the upward turn, or it could be acceptance and hope, where you're able to start to draw on the lessons learned but you're being quite cautious about that because that could also be part of that toxic positivity cycle as well.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Mm. Yeah, a lot of it, and I've thought a lot about this lately, Sarah, is that what's really hard is that, to be honest, I've had when you grow up educated from a country that is, a first world country, and you've grown up, as a very comfortable middle class, and gone to nice schools and all the rest of it, you have a certain amount of, I guess, you don't recognize your privilege. And this, even though I try to do the work and I try to, acknowledge my privilege and all the rest of it, this is when I really felt like, I had no control. I had zero control over my own destiny. Everything was happening around me. And that was really untethering when you've had a certain expectation of, it'll be okay because you've come from a, you have, when you're used to it, when you're used to privilege, when you're used to it, when it's taken away from you, it's a rude shock. So I guess I've felt like I've done a lot of growing. I've got a lot more empathy, especially, I've thought a lot about people that have come from war zones, or people that have had their homes ripped out from them. I really feel, what I've been through is a very, very small part of what these other people have gone through. And if I've felt so bad because of my little, in comparison, experience, like God knows what these poor people from, who are refugees, who just have their whole lives ripped apart. They don't even know where they're getting their next food from. It's like, I can't even. So I have a lot more recognition of the safety, emotional safety, and psychological safety, and physical safety. My experience showed me what it was like, just a little bit, not to have that, and I didn't like it. It's not good. So I'm now trying to decide how am I going to use this, and how I can help others. But yeah, I still have to get to a place for myself first as well.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something there, is to look after your own thing first before kind of going out into the world and trying to do something else. Maybe it's interesting you just hit on that, the empathy part. And I'm relating this back to what you said earlier, where you said like that one of the hardest things was having to make that emotional jump from having been, this is nonsense, it's all going to be okay, to like, oh, this is desperate. And then seeing the and again, we have to remember, like, I think what you've reminded me here is that at that time, millions of people were just dying by the day. No, maybe not millions, thousands of people were dying by the day. Hospitals were bursting at the seams in England and in certain countries in Europe and so on, and which is where we would see things. And that was hard as well, because you had to not only switch your switch, but also see all that suffering happening as well. And as you said, you're a very empathetic person who can quickly make connections in that way. So then it was like, not only the guilt of thinking that like somehow pride had come before a fall and this was this, and then suddenly you had to be like, oh my God, and I was denying that this was happening and all this suffering was going on around me. And then you kind of, now you've done a really smart thing here, which is you've turned that into like really true empathy, but you're also not trying to fix it too quickly. It's like you've slowed down somewhat. It's like you've kind of taken a breath, and you're like, in that kind of something like reconstruction and working through phase of the seven stages of grief, or something along those lines. What do you think, Tracey?
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to do is recognize that I have lived a life of privilege, even though, I've thought that I've been a deep thinker, or I've thought that, I've had, a certain amount of knowing what I want. Well, what I've had to do is just is really strip down and figure out, well, what's important to me? What is, what things what do I want to say, rather than just repeating the things that I hear. I'm a very good sponge. I do a lot of study. I'm a lifelong learner. I read a lot, and I listen to a lot of things, but what I've found is that I've just been parroting a lot of the things that I've heard. Now what I'm really trying to do is trying to distill all that down and go, well, what do I actually think? What is important to me? What is my true north? And have that direct my path from here on. So that's what it's done. And also, because of the trauma, it was trauma, and I was denying it and pushing it down. A lot of other things came bubbling up, and I wasn't able to cope. So I had therapy, which was fantastic, and it was night and day. So that's broke down a lot of old stories that I was telling myself, and just shined a light on some of those stories that I just, that had just been there, that I hadn't really, processed, but they were coming now back to bite me in the bum. So I looked at them and I went, hang on, that's not true. What is true? What is my true north? What is my true story? And I think I'm able now, better, still work, to say, well, what is my truth? And that therapy really helped me, because I was just not computing, not processing. And I'll probably have more therapy in the future, most likely. I'll keep on with coaching, because I find that that's very helpful for me, to I don't know, for any Harry Potter fans, it's like the pensieve that Dumbledore has. You sort of pull out a thread of a thought, and then you look at it from the outside and go, oh, okay, let's look at that thought. Is that true? Is that not true? And it gives you that skill of being able to do that, rather than just let that run in the, that story run in the background. So yeah, that's what I've done.
Beautiful.
Imperfectly, but yeah.
Well, there's like therapy is messy. Therapy is very messy. My therapist keeps going, should we go to the shadow side? I'm like, I'm not ready. No, I just need to keep downloading. What was I going to say? What has come out then as some of your really deep true norths? Are there any that you're able to articulate at the moment, or are they just kind of living in you right now?
What has come out of it? Well, first of all, it's not my fault.
And so many things aren't.
So many things aren't.
So many things aren't.
What else have I learned is that I've got some skills. I've got some, resilience. I've actually got a lot of education that I can draw on. I have a lot of empathy. I have a lot of curiosity, and I'm a good person. So, and I think that's, and what also I've learned more as well is that being in a lot of spaces with other people who are being very vulnerable and talking, it's like, I always thought that I was hiding a lot of my faults because, they were, they were unique to me, but what I'm recognizing is that it's quite a human thing, that I'm human, and that the struggles that I've had are very, very common, and that's okay. That's not a very articulate way of describing.
That's perfectly articulate, Tracey. And I wanted to add to that as well, that you have a lot of love. And I've always thought that about you. And that's how I closed out our last podcast, was by talking about that. You have a lot of love, you have a lot of joy. And then sometimes that can sometimes get lost in just the mechanics of daily life. And especially when something like this happens, it's like there's no through for it, or it surfaces every now and then, but like just a very loving, joyful, fun person, I think. But I have to say that it was a real turning point for me as well, when I was like, oh, I'm actually I have a good heart. Sometimes I behave badly, because I'm triggered, but I actually am a good person and I have a good heart. And that wasn't the messaging that I'd received. I hadn't received that messaging. And from that place of recognizing that you're all right, and like, you're all right. And I'm not talking about this kind of like, you are enough and stuff like that, which is also useful. It's really useful that we talk about that a lot. I mean, like, that you're actually a good person, and really knowing that in your bones really it creates so much potential and authenticity and so on. I just love that, what you said there, Tracey. This really is a story of evolution. And I also don't want to downplay the terror that was that time as well. And of course, now from this perspective, you can look at it and think, actually, I had a lot of systems in place that I'd put into place, or that my parents had put into place, or that my education had put into place, and all those things that, people like us luckily have to surround us. But it doesn't feel like that at the time. And there's no guarantees. We don't know that tomorrow we're going to find out that our family had like gambled the family fortune away or something like that. It's always good to have some independence there. It's always good, especially as women, to have financial independence, I think.
That's right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm really grateful to my past self for actually putting, to actually have done some investments when the money was good. Yeah. I didn't just squander it all on shoes and handbags. I actually put I've always felt, one of the stories I kept telling myself is, I'm not very good with money. It just sort of slips through me. But you know what? I actually did put some systems in place, from my early 20s that really where I was able to draw on. And
amazing.
And I'm sort of grateful to young Tracey, because that's really, when I actually took a good hard look at the situation, it's like, oh, okay, we're going to be okay. It's going to be rough. It's not what we thought it was going to be, but we're going to be okay. And also had to communicate that with my husband, who was also having a freak out too, understandably. So, that then, when we recognized that we weren't going to have the electricity shut off and be kicked out of the house, we then could make other plans. And so that's what we've done.
Yeah. And there's another bullshit story that you were able to smash through, which was like some set piece where you're saying, oh, I'm crap with money, or whatever it is. Or it's so funny, like, where did that come from exactly? It's so funny, isn't it, these things? And I can actually remember at the time, and this is testament to luckily to my training, and also testament to the power of emotional hijack and just how desperate you were. I can remember having these conversations with you and saying, I think we need to look at the numbers. And it just was going, it was like, there was like a barrier around you, which was, yeah. And, I honestly do think that when people are in like trauma like that, because it's just basically like getting punched in the face over and over again, but not enough to knock you out. So when you're in that space, you have to create protective stories for yourself. And that, I think, is what this kind of shock and denial piece is. It's an actual part of when you're in grief, because what you're describing is grieving as well. When you're in that grief about loss, so that you don't just totally crack up, completely crack up, that you just create some stories to make that feel okay. I was actually listening to a podcast called Griefcast recently, where one gentleman was talking about how he buried his younger sister, who was like, about 15 years younger than him. She passed away of cancer in her very early 20s, and he was in his 30s, and he was a celebrant, so he celebrated her funeral. But whilst he was in the church, he started to hallucinate, and he could see clouds and thunder in the corners of the church. And apparently this is an actual thing the body does to stop you from actually just completely breaking. It creates something to divert your mind away from the kind of, he said he could feel things snapping inside him. That's how it felt. And
wow.
I think right, but this to me feels like same but different, a different version of that. And where you just you kind of create some stories around yourself to just manage the enormity of what's happened.
Yeah, and a lot of it, what I've done as well is I've allowed people to help me and to hold me, and that's probably something that I've never done before, because I've always tried to be the person who helps everybody else, because that's who I saw myself as. I saw myself as someone who was solving everyone else's problems and helping everybody else, but I allowed people to help me, so that was a journey for me.
So you've become a human. And now it's the path to enlightenment. So that was kind of early on, and then you spent the year. When did you start to feel a kind of turnaround on your, was it when you had the therapy? Let's look at the timeline now. So it's been nearly 2 years since this kicked in. So it started in January 2020, and then kind of there was Christmas. We spent Christmas together, which was nice. So when did you start to feel a slight kind of turnaround where your body started allowing you to just go out of survival mode?
Well, I guess throughout the spring and summer of 2020, I was kind of numb. I was just, I remember getting up in the morning, just going through routine homeschooling and
oh my God, yeah, let's not forget that you had the kids at home full time and a husband at home full time.
That's
while
right.
trying to close flats down.
And we were closing.
Wait.
So yeah, so it was really just putting one foot in front of the other, and just trying to get into a different routine. And then it was after that that's when I sort of fell apart, sort of late summer, fall, autumn last year, 2020. That's when I really, I guess, because a lot of things had been done and a lot of, a new routine had been found. And the mortgage was being paid, and we'd been shutting down houses, and then I guess my body just went bleh. It's like, okay,
what do you mean by shut down?
Well, I couldn't hold a conversation. I couldn't be on a Zoom call without bursting into tears, and it was just my inner critic was just like going, I was trying to decide how to move my business forward, like, because my old business, I had to grieve that, I had to really let that go, and then, okay, well what now? It's like, I can't just live in this limbo. Now I need to go and really put myself into something that's new, that's going to make new money, that's I can't just wait for the pandemic to over, because we don't know when that's going to be. And it's when I tried to do something new, then that's when a lot of these stories just kept biting me on the bums, like going, you were lucky last time, you've been too lucky, right? You now don't have the skills to do something new. So it was just a lot of bad stories that was just crippling me, that was just stopping me from putting myself out there. And having the rapid, I had rapid therapy, so rapid RTT, rapid transformation therapy, and it was night and day. It was just like, cut the crap. This is just, it was really just my body trying to protect me from another trauma. But it wasn't serving me. So it was after that I really started putting my efforts into earning new money through the consulting business, and that's when I started getting clients and started helping other people who were in markets that were not affected by international travel.
Right.
So that's where I was able to take the skills that I had and then transfer them. Now I was able to recognize, oh, I've got some skills. I'm able to serve people who don't have the information that I have or haven't had the experience that I have. And so then it was learning how to charge people for that. So that was end of 2020. And but still it's been, at every stage it's been, are the borders opening? Are the borders opening? When is the vaccine coming? So it's sort of, it's been dripped out. And I think if I'd have known that we would still not have borders open nearly 2 years afterwards, I may have made different decisions back then. So here's me still clinging on to hope. So, yeah, I may have made different decisions back in March 2020 when everything, I could have, it may have been, hindsight, it may have been different if I was able to say, all right, this is going to be on for 2 years. I need to make a pivot very quickly. But it was so unknown. So that's been the hardest thing, is not being able to make plans. Yeah, that's probably been the hardest thing. But like I said, in hindsight, if I'd known it would have gone on this long, I may have made different decisions back then. Whether I could have or not, I don't know.
Yeah, that thing went through my head then. It was like, could you have done that? Would you
have done that? Yeah.
But I think it's a great coaching conversation or a great journaling activity to say, what would I have done? And then pull out what you want to do next, something like that.
Yeah.
And again, at this stage, we're recording this in mid-November 2021, and the borders still aren't open for Japan. So Tracey, what's happening next for you? When have you kind of started? Because I can see your business is starting to take an uptick now, and your husband also started his own business. And what's happening for you now?
So I, as a family, we sort of needed to figure out, what we were doing, and so there's certain limitations about what we could do, and obviously throwing out lots of different options. And then so Ash started up his own business, and that's been going great guns, and I'm really proud of him, and that's been paying some bills, which is fantastic. I've also been really working on helping other people with their short-term rental businesses, and which it's been really interesting because the pandemic took my gaze out of Japan. So up until everything happened, I was very much siloed in the Japan market, the inbound tourists coming in and how I could help them. And so all the lessons that I learned was around how to do it better in Japan. What I've learned is that those lessons that I've learned within Japan actually have a global relativity. No, what's the word? They're constant with the short-term rental market outside of Japan. So I can teach the hospitality lessons that I've learned here, and actually help hosts that are in other countries look after their guests better. And that's something that I can charge for, and that's something that people need, and that they're getting results from. So it's a great match. But learning how to sell your intellectual property that's been a learning curve. Yeah, I've had coaches, as you know, but being one is a very different experience. So
yeah, you have to value yourself and be happy to just say this. Yeah, because it's one thing saying here's a physical item,
yes,
and this is how much it is. But when it's like, here's my body of knowledge,
Yes.
And this is the way that I do that, Tracey, is I probably told you this before, I separate myself out from it. So it's not about me, Sarah Faruya, even though I'm the product. It's about my business. It's about Sarah Faruya coaching, and I'm in service of that business.
Yes.
And that makes it much easier for me to price then. Yeah, but it's still not easy, but I don't want to be, I just don't want to live my life whining about that. Do you know what I mean?
The hard thing is the selling part of it. It's like, you know, once I'm in front of somebody who needs me, it's like, I find it's really easy. It's just getting that, you know, that whole selling piece is quite hard. You know, to have a product that shows a value that someone else is prepared to put money down on. Yeah, that's the hard bit for me.
Mate, if I got a rental, I'd instantly hire you. There's no doubt about it, because in my mind, I have a very active imagination. I can imagine buying a house and then renting part of it out. But that kind of, like, the amount of mistakes you could make, or the amount of omissions you could make, it's just it's a no-brainer to me. It's a no-brainer to me. Right. So I can see that value. It seems simple, doesn't it? People need plates and cups and knives and forks and stuff like that, but there's something extra that goes in there, and you can help people to source furniture. You can help people to arrange their rooms so that there's a nice flow. You can help people to interior decorate. You can help people to give that extra plus alpha that can give 5-star reviews and stuff like that. And I'm not just saying this to do a kind of PR for Tracey Northcott Consulting. It's just you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Like, I would love to have an interiors shop, right? But then I'm like, how do you source things? Where do you find curtains vendor? Where do you find a wallpaper vendor? And I'm like, you know who I want to talk to? I want to go and talk to this person who already sources things in Asia, Alex from Turquoise Port. I'm like, I should talk to her and find out what and see if I actually want to do it. Do you know what I mean? So one of the things that I note from this, and it's come up a lot recently in my coaching and also in my executive coaching and in the journey programs that I run, is you can't do things alone. You can't do things alone. You need a team. And that's just normal. It really is normal. Of course, there's some things you have to work out on your own and build your resilience around, on the other hand, or skill or expertise. But you just can't. You can't do things alone. It's as simple as, like, you can't repair your local traffic lights. That's why you pay tax. There's somebody who does that for you. That idea that the pothole outside your house is your job to source the concrete and stuff. It's not. And then if you apply that back to everything else, everything, like the emotional world, the business world, pricing world, coaching world, whatever it is, brings you back. Yeah. So everybody has stories. There are many ways to lead a life. What does that mean to you?
There are many ways to lead a life. What it's meaning to me right now is that you can't live all of them. You've got to, at some point you've got to make some choices and actually go with them. And that, for me, that's a really, really hard thing to learn, because I want to do all the things and I want to experience all the things. And I think now that I'm in my 50s, I had my 50th birthday in lockdown. Don't get me started on that. But now that I'm in my 50s, I've got to recognize, all right, well, what am I need to discard some of those options now, and let them go with love, and actually choose what's important to me. How do I want to live out the rest of my life, and making some choices and sticking with them now. And I think that's what I want to do, and sticking with them until it's finished, and then look at the next thing. I think up until now I've tried to do all the things all the time, and never really had a true purpose or a true north. Now I want to really just strip away some of the things that or close out a few things. Close out a few things and actually, have some choices that are making me happy. I'm still working on it. I'm still looking for them, but that's my plan.
Thanks, Tracey. Yeah, great. So I'm going to close out the same way that I did the last time by reading your 10-year decade in Tokyo. And this may have some, you probably haven't heard this since the last time I said it to you, read
No.
it to you, because I think there may be some clues in here. And for me, I hear you, I hear you. For me, it's what's in front of me that gives me pleasure. That's it. That's it. It's like simply what's in front of me, and then grow that out. So that's how the Skywatch came about. It's like I deliberately look out of my window every day to be so happy that this is what I did, to be so happy that I moved here. And then, other things that give me little pleasures are like this cup that my assistant Laura gave me, peacock, because a peacock is a kind of motif for one of our groups. And then there's another cup here because I like to bring 2 cups of tea up with me. So British. That another client gave me, which has got all books on it. It's got all book spines on it. Little things like that really. I've got a shell that I got from my holidays off the beach. I asked the beach if I could take it, and she said yes. And some more here from from the beach. So it's just like everything kind of points you in a certain direction. I think that's the North Star thing, is you see it and you follow it, but you don't know where it's going to drop you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the idea of it. I don't know if you've read the book Finding Your North Star by Martha Beck.
No, I have not. No, I haven't read much Martha Beck. So
yeah, I mean, she's a coach with flaws and, privileges embedded in her coaching style. I suppose all coaches are, but that book is terrific. Actually, I really like that book. I found that book in New York. I was thinking about that book in New York, and then I turned to the left and there was a table with all books. In New York, there's these tables on the road, and it was right in the middle.
Wow. Okay.
And it was one of those moments where I was like, okay, I'll have that. Thank you. It was like $5 or something. Anywho, so so I'm going to read this. It's A Decade in Tokyo. It's from your old blog, The Keitai Goddess.
Which is still there. I went through that last night with my son. So he found it. And he was asking me questions about it because he'd never seen it. But now he's 11, he can Google. He found it, and we went through it. So that was quite funny.
How funny. What was he Googling you?
Yeah.
If you wonder why we're giggling, then maybe watch the first podcast that I did with Tracey, or the videos that are on my YouTube channel, and you'll understand why, because there's some choice stuff out there. So reflections over the last decade. So it says here, yours truly is now married, pregnant, and very happy with her husband, home, job, friends, family, and life in Tokyo. We'll look to getting permanent residence. Check. This year, so we have options if we ever want to leave and come back. Way too many reflections for a short blog post, but looking back over this blog that covers nearly half of this time, from April 2005, it is interesting to remember the ebb and flow of my life here. What hasn't changed are my core values, the importance of family, friends, joy, fun, and peace. The pleasures that can be gained from doing something well, be it at work, at play, or connecting people, creating smiles and solving problems, are also constants. It's been a great decade.
Yes, that still resonates.
Me too.
Being numb for 2020, I think I lost a lot of the joy. I lost a lot of the, and also I guess because I'm such a human connector, being so isolated from people, not being able to travel was a big loss. So yeah.
So that was 11 years ago.
11 years ago.
Here we are now. And so this is breadcrumbs, right? This is breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
All right then. Thank you so much, Tracey. This is the end of the podcast. I'm Sarah Faruya. I believe there are many ways to lead a life, and everybody has stories, and I want to tell them. And today we've listened to Tracey tell us the true, raw truth of the disaster that was 2020 and the rebuilding and the evolution that was 2021, and how she managed and how she had such enormous trauma, but also started to recognize what she has. And I love that she was able to she's now able to hold that paradox, and I hope that you are too, of that kind of that the terrors that she went through and also what she has, and those two can sit together without having to mean anything or make one less and one bigger than the other. It's just true. And how she was able to find this great empathy for other people, and I think that's probably an empathy that she will bring into her business in the future, at Tokyo Family Stays and also at Tracey Northcott Consulting, and how she's really looking forward to the future. And she's realized she didn't lose her house, and she's in the recovery phase. And knowing Tracey, she's a serial entrepreneur, and she's also always got something in the works. But I think she's having a little rest for now. Not a rest, obviously, because she has a family and she runs businesses, multiple businesses, but just allowing herself to have that time where she's not constantly thinking what's next and taking action, but actually just taking a bit of time to savor this building time and to savor this new evolution and to really think about where her North Star is. I think this has been really, 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 really frank. I really appreciate you, Tracey, for having been so frank and so open and so down to earth about all this and just so honest. It's really, truly, what the fuck happened? Bye, everyone.